When the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, my mother was about 15 and my father was about 20. And when they moved into the town, my mother and some of her siblings, and her parents and grandparents, everybody was seized, and they were divided up and sent to various concentration camps. My mother and one of her brothers went to or were sent to Auschwitz, and then other of her sisters and parents or grandparents were sent to Bergen-Belsen. My mother, when I was growing up, she would always tell me stories. You know, it's one as a child you didn't really want to hear. She would always revert to, you know, her childhood and being so young and her family, and them being captured and sent to the concentration camps. And she would always say, you know what the Nazis did to us, and talk about the torture and abuse and how they hardly ever had food to eat, and just some of the things that they had to do to survive on a day-to-day basis. And some period after a few years, my mother's sisters that were at Bergen-Belsen were transferred to Auschwitz. So they all, towards the end of the war, ended up being at the same location. From some of my other cousins, there were other stories of what happened initially when they went into the concentration camps. And my mother, from the stories getting from some of my cousins, was observed her grandparents and her youngest siblings being sent into gas chambers as soon as they, or within a few days of them arriving at Auschwitz. Because the Germans, they just wanted to maintain the Jews that were able to work, and that they could have some manual labor benefits from. One of the other stories was told was that after a few days when they were in Auschwitz, that there was a rebellion from some of the prisoners, and my grandfather, my mother's father, was one of those involved in the rebellion. When they became aware that they would not just be workers there, but they were going to be slaughtered and sent to gas chambers and the ovens. So there was an uprising, and they attacked the Nazi prison guards and overcame a number of them and killed some of them, and actually threw some of them into the ovens, from the story I was getting. And then when they were being attacked by a greater force of the Nazi soldiers, that the story was that my grandfather threw himself on the electrified fence because he knew what would happen to him once they got caught, and all the other people involved in the uprising. Yeah, it was difficult to comprehend as a child. You can't imagine anything taking place like that. Just, you know, being randomly shot and killed or gassed and, you know, put in ovens, and it was hard to imagine that something like that really occurred. And it wasn't until maybe also hearing similar stories from my aunts and uncles when we were together at family events over the Jewish holidays. And also just as I got older and in high school, and you're in history classes and you learn about it, and you start seeing some of the history books that has actual pictures of concentration camps and liberation of concentration camps, and what our soldiers went through emotionally themselves in these camps that they liberated. So as it became something that I would learn more and more of, seeing actual factual, you know, information, documentaries and films and photos, it's something that you realize, yeah, it was real, and my parents were, if anything, maybe under-exaggerating what occurred to them and the horrors that they had to deal with at such young ages growing up. Well, hopefully opportunities to do something like this, to speak openly when I can, which I haven't done in the past. And I've had some of my relatives, some of my aunts and uncles that participated in some of the testimonials that the Spielberg Foundation has done for the United States Holocaust Museum. And also one of my uncles in Atlanta that used to go around to all the schools to speak of the Holocaust. He was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he was 14 years old at the time. He was imprisoned, and had big impact on him and his life, and he always felt the need to go out and educate others. So hopefully some of these relatives that are still alive, of one uncle that's 95 and another one that's 84, and they still speak when given the opportunity, but they're survivors now, like myself and my cousins need to be able to speak about it and continue some of their legacies. That, and also my daughter, that I pass on things to her, that she's always aware of her Jewish roots and the Holocaust that occurred. And as hard as it is, I don't think I've been successful in trying to get her to watch full movies like Schindler's List and some of the historical documentaries that are really graphic and difficult to watch, but it's necessary so they understand that these things happen and that they're real, and that if you don't learn from your past, you could repeat it, and you just see things going on in the world today that it can be repeated.